Hello, family. So today I'm sitting in my car right outside a church building, and the reason I decided to just take a few minutes, very short, and create this video, don't mind the distractions behind me, is because the question came up in this conversation that we were having about the nature of sin. Like, specifically, the question was, how could sin arise in the heart of a perfect being? And and I had to sort of stand up and throw a different element into this that I think most people don't think about. And the majority of uninitiated won't think along these lines because we continue to just hold on to whatever we were told when we were younger, and that essentially becomes the fabric of who we are. However, if you take the time to be open to the reality that not everything that your pastor or your parents or your society taught you is necessarily right or true, but not that anybody's malicious. It may just be that at the time, that's the best thinking or the best knowledge that was available. So, absolutely love it anyway because it helps you to grow and to learn and to keep societies together. But I want to talk specifically about what sin is, and what evil is, and what darkness is. In our modern, especially Western society, we think of evil and sin and darkness as something. We give it almost human characteristics, right? In an interesting way, making it seem like it's an entity out there that has powers and the whole nine. And I'm not saying that there aren't malevolent people or malevolent creatures or beings out there. Because if you read the Bible, you have to open yourself up to the belief that there are malevolent people and principalities and powers and devils and so on. Because even Jesus in his walk, if you read the entire account of Jesus, particularly in any of the Gospels, they'll talk about instances where Jesus came face to face with malevolent beings, right? So, particularly inside people. But I'm speaking specifically to the notion of what sin is, and I want to throw something new at you if you haven't heard this before. Um, my belief is that sin is actually the absence of something, that it is not actually a thing. Just the same way, and bear with me, I know this is kind of strange if you've never heard it told this way, but just the same way that darkness is not a thing, darkness is only really the absence of light. So darkness itself really isn't a thing. Darkness is the absence of light. Likewise, sin really isn't a thing. Sin is just the absence or to be without the Spirit of God dwelling in you. That's effectively what it is. And likewise, people personify death. Death isn't really a thing. Death is just the absence of life. So I want you to start thinking about things in that way. And you'll see that what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. So, sin is the absence of God's Spirit in you. And that's why God could say to the people in the garden, he could say, don't eat of that tree, because in the day you eat of it, you will die. And this is, befuddled many people. There's many commentaries about this. But death is effectively the absence of life. And death can even be considered, in the cosmic sense, the gradual disappearance of life, right? So it's not that it's a thing. It doesn't, wear a hooded black cape and walk around with a reaping sheath. Death means just the absence of life. Because if the life is in you, then death is not in you. If the Spirit of God is in you, then sin is not in you. If light is here, then darkness is not here. Meaning, darkness is just the absence of light. Light has weight, light has particles, light is a thing. Darkness is not a thing. And that's why in the scripture, if you read in Genesis, if you read in the Gospel of John, if you read in Revelation, but Genesis particularly talks about the Spirit of God moving in the darkness and calling forth light. And he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Because light is the true creation, right? It is the second creation after the Word, right? So the Word, the sound, is the first creation. Light is the second creation. And I want you to understand that. I know I'm touching on a lot of things, but I just wanted to hone in on that one little piece about what sin is. And so if you ask the question, how could sin arise, quote unquote, in the heart of a perfect being? It's not that something new arose there or was created there. It's that something that was there was removed. So sin is actually the removal or that movement of God's Spirit out of you. And then what's left is this hollow, is this jaded, is this evil, as you would call it, because absence from God's Spirit is death in the truest sense. Just the same way, if you've got a tree, just a regular tree, and you cut a branch off of that tree, and you just put it down, it doesn't mean that immediately you see the withering of the branch and it just turns dry and becomes dust. It's a gradual process, but that branch is effectively dead unless it's united with that tree, or unless it's the type of process where you transplant something and put it back in the earth from which it can draw life. But otherwise, it's dead. And likewise, when God said to them, "In the day you eat, you will die," it's because once they were separated from God, we are in effect dead. Every single one of us. There are very few instances throughout the historical records, especially in the Bible and the holy books, where people actually are able to transcend that process of death. And that's a whole nother study, but I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about that. I know I'm at about 7.5 minutes. Usually I try to make these videos about 5 minutes. And I touched on a lot of things in this one. So if you are interested in knowing more about this, if you've got questions, if this sounds strange to you, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm more than willing to expound on this some more. But I just want to say thanks, and peace be unto you, and may the abundant life that Christ meant for us to have be truly yours. Shalom.